All right. I think we're live now. So good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give it another few seconds before we kick things off. But thanks for joining, everyone. I already see a bunch of people coming in. We'll start in a few seconds to give everyone a bit of time. All right. Maybe I can ask to the people in the chat where you all come from. So I think we have people from everywhere. So if you can tell us where you're based, so we have a bit of an interaction. I see Catalina from London. Hi, Catalina. Hi, Joan. People from Portugal as well. Turkey, great. We've got people from pretty much everywhere. Great. Thanks everyone for joining. I think we can kick things off. I think Pascal will be on and off maybe on with us, but hopefully you can manage with little bugs here. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We're really happy to have you here and really happy to have the Overview Effect joining us for this webinar. We'll try to cover a few points here, including, of course, the tooling for carbon assessments and carbon understanding. So I'm just to present a little bit, I'm Clément, I'm the partner manager for Europe at Greely, and I'll be guiding you through this webinar today. And I'm supported by our partner, the Overview Effect, based in the Netherlands, with Pascal and Wouter. Maybe you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Yes, thanks, Clément. Hi, everyone. I'm Pascal from the Overview Effect Digital. We're indeed based in Amsterdam. We have a great passion for making impact, and I'm leading the digital area, which means we support in tooling strategy, onboarding the right people and making tooling successful for the right ESG challenges. And one of them we're discussing today.
Yes, and I'm Wouter, so I work as a greenhouse gas emission expert for the Overview Effect, and I help many companies throughout Europe actually with calculating their greenhouse gas emission footprints, but also really creating action plans to start improving them. So happy to be here.
Great, thanks guys for joining, and really nice to have you here with your expertise and see how we can move from Excel-based analysis to carbon tooling for carbon emissions. So here's the agenda for today. Of course, we've been through the introduction already, but we will have a little bit of a deep dive into what's happening in carbon today, thanks to the Overview Effect. Also seeing how companies get started into their carbon assessments, but more specifically using a tool, and explaining you eventually, of course, how we see things failing with Excel spreadsheets, and also how to use smart tooling for your next carbon assessments. Eventually, we'll go over, of course, the real life reflections during this webinar. All right, so first thing first, I'll hand it over to the Overview Effect, Pascal and Wouter.
Yes, thanks, Clément. Yes, of course, we're looking from reporting obligations to making real impact. And I think that's for, at least for us, that's where our passion lies. And that's what I think we should always have in mind. And we'll touch upon it later. But, in my theory, tooling is not an objective as such, right? It should be an enabler for sustainability and driving impact. So if we mostly let's start taking one step back, and I would like to give you a bit of an overview of what we see happening in the market today. So what is happening specifically in carbon, of course, and it might sound a little bit as a surprise, but what we see is that regulatory pressure is easing down a little bit. It's because of delays like in Omnibus, or maybe changing geopolitical environment that we currently see. But what you would expect then is that also the awareness and the consciousness for carbon would actually go down. And that is what we not see today. And why is that? We actually see, I think, that the attention and the momentum for carbon is rising a bit. And what we mostly, if we talk to our customers, but also to venture capitalists and everybody, the stakeholders that are in the market for these kind of subjects, they say we are actually more carbon conscious today than we were before. And our expectations from the companies we work for, the companies we own, is actually that we expect them to act stronger on carbon than they did before. So what you see in the market is it's less that you must, but legislation is more like why haven't you started on carbon and trying to make impact and reducing your carbon footprint? Now, that is, of course, easy to say, but let's put some fundament below that and look at 3 drivers that we see that is actually causing sounds a little bit negative, right? That is actually behind this change, that this momentum is still very much there. And the first one is the awareness of inaction, and that is very much related to actual carbon pricing. Carbon pricing has not hit everyone. It's in certain segments. For example, when you're in steel, on cement, we know emission trading systems have landed there, and those kind of companies have really to act on carbon pricing. And what you see, that's not only in the EU, where we have the ETS system, but also China, South Korea, and also in Canada, those type of ETS systems have also been put in place. And that's why you see that carbon pricing is becoming stronger and stronger and more present globally. And what we when discussing these kind of subjects also with BCG, they did a deep study on this, and they projected that if carbon pricing actually hits all companies, it could be an impact of 50% of the EBITDA. So if you look at the first driver of not acting, that is actually very much an economical driver, that if you don't act, carbon pricing will become a reality. So let's be sure that your carbon footprint is as low as possible. That's the first one. The other one is what we call the trickle-down effect. I know talking to some companies, they said, oh, I'm so happy I'm not in scope of Omnibus anymore. And then the next day they woke up and they actually realized they still had to do carbon registration and carbon accounting. And why was that? Simply because they're part of a value chain. And I think you can say a lot of things about CSRD, and maybe it's too bureaucratic and it's, it goes too far. But I think the excellent point about this is that CSRD is not only looking anymore at the company itself, but at the entire value chain. And so it means that if you're a supplier to a company that's in scope of CSRD, they will demand carbon data for their scope 3 accounting because they need to report on it. So the trickle-down effect as such is that because a big company in the value chain needs to report on carbon, it trickles down through the entire value chain to make sure you act on carbon accounting. Now, last but not least, what do we see is, and I'm also happy about this, that's the carbon maturity, right? My first years in working in sustainability environment, it was very much about just getting one KPI, what's our carbon footprint? But today, because companies want to act and they actually want to reduce it, carbon accounting has new stakeholders. So finance get involved, for example, or procurement gets involved to develop LCAs. And it also becomes much more granular. It's much more connected to the business and it becomes much more actionable. And that is very nice to make real impact. And that's also, I think, one of the reasons that we have this webinar, because the fact that you have to become more actionable and more granular makes it also more complex. More data is involved. If you would go to the next slide, Clement. Let's see. Yeah. So it is that you need more data, and it doesn't mean automatically that I'm sitting here and say, okay, everybody wake up, jump into tooling. No, definitely not. If you want to get started on a journey, if carbon awareness is also rising in your company, usually we recommend to do your homework well. and really understand what is the data you would like to collect, what stakeholders are involved, how's my data quality. Do an Excel exercise for the first time to get a real good feel about what carbon accounting for you and your value chain and for your company actually means. And make sure that you get a clear picture of what it is and use that to really start maturing across the journey. Yeah, and this is really if there's no specific questions, or I'll see some questions maybe popping in on the chat. I would like to hand over to Wouter because he has more experience also on how you actually mature on your carbon accounting in the value chain.
And so iterating on what Pascal said, we just want to set the scene and take you along the journey, what we see happening with companies throughout their tooling cycle and data cycle. So we think it's perfectly logical and normal to start in Excel with your first scope 1 and 2 emission data collections. It's fairly simple when you start off with. There are not many data points, not many actors that you need to talk to, and it's probably only about collecting some fuel data and some electricity data. So that's fairly doable. It's still error sensitive, but it gets you by pretty quickly and flexible. When it gets more complicated is where you really jump into scope 3 and start taking that seriously, and maybe even start developing and thinking about doing LCAs or product carbon footprints. All of a sudden, there's a whole supply chain that you need to collect data from. There's many different actors and partners that you want to have data from internally and externally. So it becomes way more vast very quickly. It's very difficult to have a good template in Excel that really does the job properly to do so. So it's hard to audit afterwards, but it's also difficult for you as a company to really create the insights you want to have then later to start making impact with your emissions. So that's about the point where we see that moving away from Excel towards tooling really benefits you in the sense of having effective insights, but also it will save you lots of time, and it will also save you lots of errors and solving things later on when you learn and develop. So yeah, so that's why we think this webinar is a very good idea, and transitioning at one point when it fits you as a company.
All right. As Pascal and Wouter said, that's a journey. So we also want to touch base on why Excel spreadsheets are failing throughout the process more and more, and also what can we expect from a smart tooling like Greenly, in the sense that it's actually easing the process, but we will see how, and we'll also reviewing the most common challenges that we see throughout a process like this. As you guys explained, there's a few blockers across the road, and smart tooling can help remove them and just ease the process towards a more complete and more precise approach on carbon accounting, also an easy process for companies. So basically, there's a few common challenges that usually we're facing as companies towards carbon assessments. A few of them, a bunch of them would be like, for example, a different in format in terms of Excel spreadsheets. So we can have different typos, different type of ways of, I don't know, mentioning a city or a country. So all the databases might not match together and create a difference in the carbon calculation behind it. So eventually the result will not be appropriate and will not be accurate on the actual carbon emissions from the company. There's also this notion of, especially for larger enterprises, of going after stakeholders. There's Excel spreadsheets all across the company with, of course, not the same format, but different teams, different stakeholders. It's hard to catch up with them. Sometimes they're pretty busy. So there's a lot of task management to do, project management to do for the person who's leading these projects. And it's his role or her role to chase these people for data contribution into this process. So that's really where a lot of time is spent and a lot of time is lost during the data collection process, and where actually smart tooling can help quite a lot. We'll see afterwards with example within Greenly's platform. Of course, the whole calculation is quite important. I was mentioning the accuracy and the uncertainty of such calculations. There's several ways of calculating. There's different ways of actually creating emission factors, so calculating the carbon emissions of a company. Using the smart tool like Greenly, you will be removing these blockers because everything can be automatically done from the platform. Again, we'll deep dive a little bit more afterwards. So yeah, that's all of these challenges. There's a lot more that can be avoided thanks to smart tooling. Of course, at the very end of a process, for example, you have to deliver, you have to build deliverables or generate a report on the process. That's also something that can be automated with Greeny and with a smart tool like this. In terms of changing from Excel spreadsheet to a scalable tool, we have different ways of doing and also a timeline for it. So we'll hand it over to Pascal, who's pretty used to this process.
Yeah, the process itself, thanks, Clément. But I think also, I think so if you move, so what you're saying from Excel to tooling selection, every company is different and every supply chain is different. So even if you're in the same business, it might be that you source from different continents or that your production process is different. So it's not always easy in a one-on-one copy. And that's why, so in this phase, I just want to highlight a few things to everybody here. So if you are in the tool, start thinking about tooling and tooling selection, there's some excellent options here, like what Clément is saying, what Greenly offers. And make sure that within that scope that they offer, that you do fit for purpose tooling selection. It's always interesting to buy the car, right, with all the whistles and the mirrors and the shiny parts, but maybe you don't need it because it's great that cars can drive 250 kilometers in Germany. In Holland, the obligation is we can only drive 100. So I can buy this nice fancy car and I can never use it in full. Might be a little bit a waste of money. So think about fit for purpose. But also think about the future if you select your tooling, tooling that can grow along with you. So even that the fact that it might not be everything you need today, it might be that in your ESG journey, based on your ESG strategy, you want to see that, okay, today I do only scope 1 and 2. I think in the next 2 years, I will also do SBTI and maybe onboard scope 3. And maybe after that, even LCA tooling. So think about that and then also select a tool that fits with that journey. Last but not least, in tooling, when we select it, we think a lot about the tool itself. What can it do? But my recommendation is also to really evaluate how intuitive it is. You know, how easy it is for internal users to activate it and to be engaged with it. So moving from Excel to Greenly, think about those kind of questions and then start the discussion about make a clear RFP and start discussion on what you need.
Yes, thanks, Pascal. And let's get a bit more technical and seeing also what a smart tool looks like and how we can use it for the sake of easy process and easy calculation for your fit for purpose. As Pascal was saying, it's important to understand that we can adapt to the client's needs and also with a tool like Greenly, there is a scalability. So as Pascal was mentioning, you can start with scope 1 and 2 and then add modules and add things that you might need eventually for your business. So I took a few screenshots from our Greenly's platform to show you a little bit more of how it looks and also how you can use it as a smart tooling tool for your process. So we were mentioning the fact that companies are losing a lot of time, wasting a lot of time, having to do task management in these kind of processes. So chasing the stakeholders, chasing data contributors all across the company, maybe in different countries, different entities. So that's exactly one of the first advantages of a tool like Greenly is just to organize this and having all the follow-ups done automatically by the system. So the idea behind it is just to first, prior to the assessment, understand who will be the stakeholders, who will be the people contributing to this carbon assessment, eventually adding them to the platform and making sure they contribute well to what we do using the task management tool. And then eventually they will be able to receive templates and receive information about what exactly they need to do. And it removes a lot of constraints for the project manager and a lot of energy on here or our side to chase people up. This works exactly the same for a lot of modules that are part of a smart tool like Greenly, so GHG reporting, so carbon accounting, but also CSRD, all the other frameworks that we cover, GRI and stuff like this. So that works the same. The goal here is really to do task management to help the project manager save a lot of time during the process, which is usually on his duty when doing such an assessment. Another thing to understand here is the accuracy. We've been mentioning quite a lot already in this webinar, the accuracy and the problems that can happen when using Excel spreadsheets behind the calculation and everything during a carbon assessment. What a tool like Greenly can help you with is understanding the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions deeply with calculations that we are developing according to GHG guidelines, according to emission factors that we create following data sources. So basically, we can use activity data to calculate these carbon emissions based on the proper activities of the company. Pascal was mentioning the analogy with the car. Here, we only stick to the activities related to your company, to your business. We don't want to add extra work to what you need. We're just focusing on the activity and on the carbon emissions related to your business. So basically here, you will be able to understand a bit more your scope 1, 2, 3 emissions on these different activities with the calculation that we provide you with. Again, these emission factors, usually when you go through Excel spreadsheets, it can be quite a hassle to have a clear methodology that is compliant to what you want to achieve and to have a better level of accuracy. But with this, it will be automatically done. In the same vibe of increasing the accuracy and lowering the level of uncertainty, this can't happen with an Excel spreadsheet, is the data quality. Of course, automatically, the platform like Greenly will flag any potential problems, any potential issues that can happen throughout the process, and making sure the data will be qualitative enough for calculation. This way, a company can be audited, they can report on their carbon emissions, being safe in understanding that their carbon emissions reporting is compliant and is actually accurate to their activity and to the spendings. So you can see here how it looks. Greenly will automatically flag the issues, and you can review them as a project manager or working with a company like the Overview Effect. They will help you cover all the data quality checks to make sure the level of accuracy is increased. We were also mentioning the reporting phase because obviously a lot of companies have to report and have to have deliverables at the end of the process. Here, the goal is really to understand better and go a little bit beyond just a PDF deliverable. You have a better understanding of your carbon emissions and also a better way of reducing them because you understand deeper even scope 3 emissions. You'll be able to take actions and reduction plans to build a decarbonization strategy, to build a decarbonization pathway according to certain targets that you have as a company, maybe becoming SBTi compliance, as Pascal said, or becoming net zero in a few years. So this way you have these dashboards, they're interactive, so you can click on every one of them to understand even deeper the emissions. What we want to do, and what's also really hard when using only Excel spreadsheet, is the fact that we don't cover that much of the scope 3 emissions and we don't understand them as much. So the goal behind this is really to deep dive into the suppliers, the value chain, as Pascal said, and understanding all of the suppliers' emissions. So we can calculate even further your activity data and your carbon emissions related to your purchase as a company. So that's also part of what Greenly does, is engaging the suppliers, giving you access to a questionnaire that you can send to the suppliers to make sure the whole value chain is actually moving with you towards a more sustainable approach, more sustainable purchasing, procurement in your business. All right, that's related to what we said before, the first goal of a tool like Greenly is really to reduce the level of uncertainty, which is usually quite high when using an Excel spreadsheet. With all the data checks that we saw earlier, that's how we reduce this level and how we increase the accuracy of the report that you will be able to publish. And eventually, we can build reduction actions. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. There is a whole pathway where you can set clear targets, where you want to be in 2030, for example. Do you want to be net zero? And this way, we, based on the carbon emissions calculation that we saw earlier, you can actually deploy some actions, implement some actions within the company that are efficient in terms of reduction, and everything can be done from the platform, and also can be studied the year after if you reached your targets in terms of reduction and stuff like that. That's pretty much in a nutshell that what can a smart tool like Greenly can offer. And then I'll pass it on to Pascal and Wouter to see real life reflections on the groundwork that have been done.
I think it's your first, Wouter, right?
Yeah, so what we'd like to do is just give some tips and tricks of what we learned on the ground, as said. So we prepared a couple of things, and what we straight immediately thought about is engaging people early within your company and getting them on board early in the process. Just to start getting a mutual understanding of what you guys need, what it means to have a simple process aligned, and what is expected from each other. And that's more often seen than not, that it starts really centralized in a sustainability department or a data collection or finance department, and that people get engaged too late in the process. And you would have done things differently if you would have heard those needs and requirements from them earlier. So that's our first tip. Start with that immediately and get people on board. The second one, on the next slide. Pascal.
Yes. So what we say, and I think it's nice to finish this part more with the human part than just the tech part, is we say never the tech without the touch. Wouter already mentioned starting early, but if you look at all technology implementations, there's research that clearly shows that the tooling as such and the data is of course important, but the real factor to make things a success are the people. And so when you think about people, it's about onboarding them early, what Wouter said, but building upon it, make sure that those people really understand the case for change. And the tip I would like to give is also that you tend in the beginning of tooling to focus of, okay, do we actually see what our CO2 footprint is in this case, and are we reducing? And my recommendation would be to target a different KPI, and that's the KPI of adoption. Are users actually using the tool the way they should be using it? So have we identified early in the stage, as Wouter said, who should be using it, how frequently, in what kind of decisions should they use the tooling and the data? And are we actually seeing that happens? Because if you see that they actually start using it, you'll get and you will reap the benefits of the tooling. If they don't start using it, everything stays theoretical, and your investment might fail. And that's of course what nobody wants, because we use the tool to automate things, to make it more efficient, right? And to make sure more resources are available to actually execute and create a bigger impact. If you move forward to the next one, Clément. Yeah, so what we typically do, it's the Q&A. No, it's good. So what we typically do is also try to support our clients then in not only having a roadmap for tech implementation, but also of touch implementation. What do you need? Where do you need to look at with the human factor? And specifically also, for example, sometimes creating questionnaires to understand if they're using it. But if the tooling allows, what's even better is is, for example, creating a dashboard behind the dashboard, as we call it. So a dashboard in which you track what I just said, what departments are using it, who's using it, how frequently, what parts of the tool are they actually using. It creates a lot of insight, and it helps you, be much more successful in integrating it in your day-to-day business.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And on this, we studied at Greenly, we studied the time that is saved throughout a process like this using a smart tooling. So obviously, having all this automatically generated reports and everything throughout the whole process, and we estimated to 80% the time that can be saved using a smart tool. So it's really related to what you were just saying, because if you onboard rightly all the people at the company that will be using it, there is a lot of potential in terms of course, time, but eventually also money, because you are just removing a lot of tasks from the project manager. And we know that's kind of sometimes a blocker for companies to start their sustainability journey, is to see that as an expense, as a spending for the company. But eventually, you will just save a lot of time, because that's something you will have to do, whether it's on regulation or communication or whatever. So it's better, I think, to do it by saving time and saving a lot of tasks for the project manager and all the teams that will be involved, because obviously, as you were saying, if you involve the right people and onboard them the right way, they will know what to do, and they will know how to complete the task that they have to do to contribute in terms of data, or if it's the procurement team or the HR team or whatever, instead of having a broad Excel spreadsheet that they need to fill in and not really knowing where to go for. So that's exactly where you can save a lot of time during this process. So there's definitely a lot of engagement to have with the team, and this way we are ending kind of the presentation, but we wanted to leave a lot of time for potential questions. We have a question from Hélène. So can Greenly also track carbon removal for flag sector? That's something that we can cover from the platform. So basically, as I showed a little bit earlier on the platform, you are able to calculate your carbon emissions on a given date, and then eventually have the comparison on a yearly basis, or even on a shorter basis, to have the difference between the two analyses, and to make sure we are actually setting clear targets for example, the flag sector in that case, and the carbon that has been removed from this value chain and from the carbon emissions of the spendings, let's say, or the activity-based data. So that's really on the comparison that you can have within the platform between the two dates, the given dates, and you will be able to see the carbon removal. Also, throughout this kind of process, of course, support from a team like Pascal's and Wouter's is quite helpful, because you can elaborate on these, set the clear targets with them, and actually use the right tools within the tool to make sure you actually reach this kind of data and this kind of approach. Is there any other questions, or maybe Wouter and Pascal, you wanted to touch on this?
No, I don't see any additional questions. No, at least from my side, thanks for having us, Clément. And it's the flag sector is one sector that you have experience in, that the tool works. We've been discussing specific usages in the event sector, for example, before, or in energy. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities and experience. So I would say to everybody, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much for your time and interest for today.
Yeah, thanks for coming on stage with us. We really think there is a lot to do next. And yeah, as you said, we'll be happy to reach out to you and making sure we carry on this conversation on carbon, but also other frameworks more ESG related with you. And yeah, we will stay, of course, in contact in the coming weeks. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.